All right. Hi everyone, this is Stephen Wang, and this is my video on the midterm evaluation. All right. Table of contents. First thing we're going to be going over is the HTML, CSS, and then we do Bootstrap, JavaScript. And then we'll tap into Node.js, Express, JavaScript closures. That's the topic that I want to dive deeper into and spend more time on, and a live coding at the end. All right, next. So HTML is a hypertext markup language, or it stands for hypertext markup language, and is a markup language and not a coding language. It's pretty much the building blocks of a web page. It really so all the words we see on the web page is from HTML. And then so HTML has tags, as you can see on the right here. There's headers, footers, headings, right, paragraphs, buttons, images. So it's represented by these arrows. Then you have our tabs inside the arrows. Um, so uh, So H1 and H6, those are headings. Obviously H1 is the larger, hierarchy ones. It's a hierarchy order. H6 is the smaller one, uh, or the lowest one in the hierarchy. And then we have paragraphs, and a bunch of others. We have headers, footers, buttons, images, and then we also have A, which is the hyperlink, or you can put a URL there. And then we have this an example HTML code where this is the basic setup of an HTML code. We end with HTML. We started with HTML. We ended with HTML. We have a header, and then pretty much all the contents go into the body here. All right. Yep. So HTML is really the foundation of a web page, the words. And then next we have CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's used for the visual representation, or makes the style of the formatting of the website. And the CSS, it can target a specific HTML element. So let's say we have let's say we have P in HTML here. We can specify that in CSS and format the paragraph in CSS. And then one of the major things about CSS is its box model. This is really important because with the box model, we can imagine every element is a rectangular box, and we can format it based on it's a box. So every word, let's say let's say a body of paragraph, right? This whole paragraph can be represented by, but we can imagine that with like a box or a border around it, and then we can style that by itself, and it won't affect the whole web page, right? So there's a couple of parameters we can do with the box model. There's width, which is the length of the size, padding, space between content and border. Border is the sort of like a weight, like the line, the padding, and margin, which is the space outside of border. And there's other uh, sort of how should I say it? Other components or so. There's font size, font weight, letter spacing, word spacing, and color. And CSS is becoming more powerful in that it can do things on its own, using its own tools without you know going without using the tools of others. So CSS can style a web page using its own um, uh, sort of styling text. All right, next up we have Bootstrap. So Bootstrap contains uh, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which we'll talk about in the next slide. Um, so Bootstrap is a framework that makes creating or styling a website easy, or getting sort of the structure of the underlying code for HTML easy too. It can be used instead of CSS because it just makes the styling. It has pre-built sort of styling there for us. Um, say cards, right? Nav bar contain components. We can all adjust. We have those already, and we don't have to go through CSS to make those happen, right? And then one of the important thing is there's style component and interactive component for Bootstrap. So style components, they only doesn't require JavaScript. Style is only you know uh, contains HTML and CSS. Um, those are non-interactive stuff, static stuff, pretty much, and the interactive component requires JavaScript JavaScript is because JavaScript is required for the website behavior and interactability. Yep, these are just examples of looking at. Uh, Next, oh, one thing I want to talk about is S-Link and Prettier. I didn't include it here. I forgot to include it here, but Prettier is sort of we can have Prettier to give a requirement is a file. Prettier is a file. We can use it as a file to give our codes a style or format requirement that we have to follow. If not, it will throw an error. So let's say we have to have a semicolon, right? We can put that in Prettier, and then Prettier or S-Link will throw us error if we have a semicolon at the end of whatever line in CSS or HTML. All right, so now go to JavaScript. So in the Bootstrap side, we talked a little bit about JavaScript. So JavaScript really just makes web pages interactive and dynamic. Um, it's in charge of the behavior and the interactability of the web page, and also it's the foundation of React, which we will learn after the midterm after this, so React won't be in this video. Um, so JavaScript is JavaScript has the interactive feature is because one of the reasons is because it has these elements, many sort of um, these functions. They can select elements, they can modify elements, they can create elements, and they can do event handling too. So what JavaScript has, or one of the components, JavaScript has objects, arrays, higher order functions, closures. Closures is really important here. We'll talk about that deeper in the next slides. Yep. So next up is Node.js. So why do we need Node.js? Because it runs servers. One of the reasons is it runs servers, and what we use in this class or web development in general because it runs JavaScripts. It runs JavaScripts, and instead of multi-threaded event loop, it's single-threaded event loop. So with a single-threaded event loop, it's faster than multi-threaded and it's more efficient. So single-threaded event loop, for example, let's say we have a client A, client B, client C. With the single-threaded event loop, the server will take all three requests and return uh, the once it returns the previous request. So let's say uh, client A, B, C all request something, the server will take all three, will receive all three, will process all three, but then it will give client A response, and then client B response, and C response. Um, on the other hand, multi-threaded event loop, same example, client A, B, and C, they will take A first, respond to A first, and then they take client B, and so on. So client B, so instead of receiving all the requests at once, it does it one by one, which is not efficient. So Node.js benefits of using Node.js is to create server side or the server easier, right? And then the highlight um, is that it has nice packages, libraries, and it handles dependencies really well. All right, next up we have Express. Why do we use Express? Because it's sort of like a middleman or a middleware. It does request handling. It does HTTP methods serving files like so get post, right. Um, what it does is uh, it sort of process it's it acts as it acts as the middleman between the request from the client and the response from the server. So it's in the middle, and it will sort of um, uh, you know correct so request handling pretty much. It just corrects it kind of formulates or kind of um, makes the request understood by for the server, and then vice versa. Um, so one of the benefits is that it helps Node.js build server faster. So if we just use Node.js, we can build server, right? But with Express, we can make it faster and more efficient. And the highlight is that it can be linked to databases because it's the middleman and to any database pretty much. Uh, but as an example, I included MySQL. So this is the concept map. For front end, we have HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Um, and then I put those inside Bootstrap because Bootstrap contains um, all three of these, right? But Bootstrap can definitely have its own section here because it's dependent and it doesn't require these two you know uh, languages. And now I'll go to backend. Node.js, right? It's the server side server. Express is the middleware, and the database. The MongoDB or databases like MySQL. And then Docker here is the uh, is what deploys the server. Yep. All right. So now we'll go deeper into closures, JavaScript closures. So closures are one of the most important part of JavaScript, and not only JavaScript, but all the other languages too. Um, so in Python we'll have no. So a closure is a function inside a function, and the inner function remembers what the outer function returns, or what the outer function has, right? And then it holds the outcome from before. And it's also used for remembering, protecting, and organizing. So to dive deeper, um, so closures are really just are functions that can access values outside of their uh, own function. Uh, so let's say we have an outer function and an inner function, and then outside of those functions we have some we call those functions we call those functions, right? So in order to call those functions, we need the inner function to access values of the outer function in order to uh, so if the inner function doesn't have access to the outer function, then the inner function won't be able to calculate what we want it to calculate. So in there will be a live example later, which can be better than me explaining here, but a closure, in other words, a closure is a function that retains access to its outer function's variables even after the outer function has finished executing. So usually when we go through, nested functions or nested loops in other languages, um, we do the first function first, and then it taps into the inner function, and then inner function does its own stuff, and then it goes back to the outer function, right? It's kind of the same thing, but the inner function will have to um, call the outer function, and then the the function or the variable that's calling the function outside will also has to have the reference to the outer function. So um, let's go to the live coding now. Uh, so for example, uh, let's do example of a bank account where we will have uh, three functions, one outer function, and then two inner functions side by side inside the outer function. So first we have let's do a function create bank account. And then we want to let the balance of our bank account to be 1,000. Uh, so this will be sort of uh, the information that we need that the inner function needs to access, right? Because the function create bank balance account is the outer function. So what we will return is um, what we want to deposit. Right? So it'll be so after we deposit the amount, the balance. So this is where the inner function will need uh, the information of the outer function, because if not, then we won't be able to calculate uh, the the updated balance in our bank account. So we do plus the balance plus the amount, right? And now next is we want to show the balance. Let's say we have balance and this. Right? So now we want to call this function. We need to reference the outer function here. and then we want to call. Let's say let's do 500. And then we want to cut. All right. So let's run this quick. Oh, expected line 12. Let's run this one. No, we should. Okay, so run this. Run this code. So, okay, so right here we have 1,000 as the balance because we called it first. We called it, and then we want to set to account, and then now we want to show the balance. So this account referenced this outer function, and then account deposit, which show balance. I mean, I'm sorry. So account show balance reference the inner function, but the inner function has to. So in order to output balance equals 1,000, this thing, the inner function show balance has to reference the outer function. It has to get this information in order to output this, right? So without closures, this wouldn't happen. Without closures, um, the data retained will be thrown into a garbage collector, right? So same thing with the deposit. Um, so same thing with the deposit. It gets it saves this balance information and then adds the amount 500 to it, and then the inner function retains that information, and then it gives out. So when we call show balance first, it will show the updated balance. So if we were to uh, do deposit like 700 right, this time, do 700 and then account show balance. Right now, this time, second, let's do it'll be 1,000, 1,500 because it added 500, and then 2,200 because it added 700 on top of the 1,500. So this is the concept of closures. It helps remember the information outside of its inner function, because in here we don't have the uh, the information, right. The sort of uh, the secret information is from the outer function, and then the inner function takes that information. This code really it helps explain it, because inside this function, inside this inner function, it also had it. So this deposit um, references this balance, right? So after it references balance, it became local inside this inner function. So now these are all side by side. It's not outer anymore. It's not in the outer function. It's all inside this inner function, and then it just makes things easier. So To recap, we have this account which referenced this function, and then this outer function, and this outer function reference these references from the inner functions, deposit and show balance. All right. Yeah. Thank you so much.